Hi, everyone. We're going to be presenting on the ancient civilization of Athens. So, first, Athens was in the same place that present day Athens is today. That little map kind of shows you what is considered the Athenian territory. And then it had a component of it that was walled. This was called the Acropolis. The Acropolis included the Parthenon, which is a temple of the Greek goddess Athena. And there's a photo of the Parthenon more recently, of course, right over there. And then this Acropolis area, which was just the walled component of Athens, was about 2 kilometers from west to east. And then it was slightly less than that from north to south. And it was also substantially smaller than modern day Athens, though, of course, Athens as a whole did extend kind of outside of this little Acropolis, as well as the different regions and cities that it captured. The history of Athens. So it was at its peak in the 4th and 5th century BCE. It had about 300,000 inhabitants. And again, this was the kind of the peak of Athens. And most of these inhabitants were either slaves or foreign residents who paid to live in Athens. Either way, both of these groups of people did not have rights. So while Athens is known as the first democracy, not everyone had rights. In fact, only 10% of the population did have rights. And in order to have rights, you had to be adult, male, and eligible to meet as part of the assembly and vote. And then also Athens was powerful in the Greek world. And this was for multiple reasons. For one thing, it had a pretty central location. It had access to the sea, and this was really important for trading or for war. And then it also had a very secure and protected Acropolis, which again is just the fortified part of the city. And a lot of the major sites, like the temples, such as the temple that was the Parthenon, were located within the Acropolis. So that was really great. And then Athens also kind of became even more large and wealthy after conquering many other cities. We'll get more into that in a minute, but once Athens kind of conquered all these different cities and had so many different inhabitants, it led to a social class system and eventually social unrest.
Okay, so then the environment and then the agriculture success that kind of came out from the environment in this area. Of course, most of us know that this is a Mediterranean climate, so pretty similar to what we have here in Slow. It stayed pretty constant. The temperature, of course, there was some fluctuation for winter, but pretty consistent rainfall, and that led to a really great harvest. June marked the beginning of wheat harvest, which was a really big crop then. The main ones were just all cereals, olives, and vines, which I assume means wine. The olives were, of course, fundamental because they were the gift that Athena gave to kind of symbolize the beginning of the city. It was really, the hilly parts were terraced, which definitely got rid of erosion. There were pigs was a really big animal use or just bred there. The workforce was a lot of slaves though, and then the land was owned by a lot of aristocrats, so it was very straddled the economy. And then yeah, they used manure, they knew how to refurbish the soil and that type of thing, but yeah.
Yeah, so Athens had a very sophisticated social system for their time. This can be seen in instances such as them voting in a democracy and using an alphabet to communicate. The social hierarchy in Athens split into 4 different tiers. There was the upper class, which was men who were born in Athens. These are also known as aristocrats, and they occupied jobs such as the government positions and education positions. The next class was the middle class, and these were men who were more skilled at trades, and they weren't Athenian born. And this makes sense as Athens was like the trading capital of ancient Greece, and they had a lot less rights than the upper class. Next, there was the lower class. These people were very poor, and most of the time they were, in fact, just freed slaves. And our final class is slaves, who essentially are just the foundation of Athens, did all the work there. Athens began as a monarchy, but quickly switched to an early version of democracy to allow all of their citizens to vote instead of just allowing the upper class to control the city state. This democracy differed from a modern democracy, as if you were not to vote, they would come after you and you would be punished. And women had almost no power in Athens. They were not allowed to vote, they could not own land, and they were assigned marriages at a young age, around 13. Most women were meant to stay in the house in Athens. And the only other jobs where there's lots of evidence was hierarchical prostitution. And yeah, that's the social system. So Athens' most prominent neighbor was Sparta. These are the two city-states that essentially ran ancient Greece. Sparta ran their government as an oligarchy rather than a democracy like Athens did. And Sparta was very military based in their education systems due to the Messenian revolt in 743 to 724 BC. And women had more rights in Sparta due to the absence of men always being at war. Women owned about a third of the land in Sparta, and young boys and girls were both trained for combat rather than in Athens, only the young boys were trained. And Athens was a merchant-based trading society, whereas Sparta focused on military dominance. The economies were each based on these respective trades, whereas Athens' economy was only large due to trading and Sparta was only large due to conquering. And Athens had to have a much stronger navy than Sparta, as it was vital to protecting trade routes.
So there were a multitude of reasons that caused the collapse of Athens. First of all, as Audrey said, obviously agriculture was really important for their economy, which meant that land was probably the most valuable resource in Athens. And farmland was monopolized, so people with the most money had the best farmland, and that created tension between the nobles and the lower class people. There was also tension because of their government system, how certain people could participate in assemblies and others couldn't. So there was already tension within Athens, which kind of weakened them. And then outside of Athens, Greece was made up of city-states, and they were all ruled by different forms of government. And they formed alliances with each other, but they were always changing. And there was constant fighting between all the city-states, which over time weakened Greece as a whole. Athens' democracy was obviously a good thing sometimes, but it also resulted in people voting in really bad leaders who just should not have been leading government and making military choices and decisions. And so when Athens and Sparta went to war with each other in the Peloponnesian War, bad choices were made and eventually ended with Athens losing and the power in Greece shifting from Athens to Sparta. And that's arguably what kind of began that decline in Athens. But what also happened was during the war, Sparta besieged Athens. So they had a big population of Athens kind of stuck in one place, and plague broke out there and a bunch of people died. Nobody really knows what the disease was or disease is, but we know that it did play a big part in their fall. Another issue that they had was their leaders were often just arrogant. They did really well in the Persian War. So after that, they thought they were kind of the best, and just they did not prepare enough for the Peloponnesian War.
Yeah, and like Kate was saying, so during the Peloponnesian War, what happened to the Athenian people is they were isolated as Sparta was like plotting a siege around the city. So plague did break out, and they did lose about 2/3 of the Athenian population. But then following their defeat, ultimately in 405 BC, Athenian society was absorbed into the Spartan Empire, and was under Spartan oligarch rule. This was only short-lived. This lasted nearly a year until Athens overthrew the oligarchs and they restored democracy to Athens. And then again, about 50 years later, 338 BC, the Macedonian Empire then planned their invasion into Greece, where they defeated a Greek coalition army led by Athens and Thebes. And then a peace treaty was then signed in 346 BC, called the Peace of Philocrates, was between Macedonia and Athens. They established the League of Corinth, which comprised of former Greek adversaries, into a formal alliance with Macedonia. But yeah. And then as far as applications go, I think it's pretty easy to state that slave labor is not good. And Athenian society was built like primarily upon the use of slaves for labor. And then, like we've mentioned earlier, Athens kind of known as being the pioneers of democracy. And that was great for a period of time, but also due to poor decisions, poor leadership, they were always involved in conflict. So that's something we can learn about today, that democracy does have its pros, but it can also have its cons. And then ultimately their ego, the Athenians did have a bit of like a way of thinking that they were better, superior than their neighboring city-states, which also led to their demise. But then also, like I was saying, constant conflict. When you're constantly fighting, constantly warring, trying to expand your borders, it's great for a little bit. If you are successful, you can, expand your empire, but then ultimately it just led to their demise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Fire.
good.
Dude, did you guys see my dog? He was like,
No, we didn't
Okay,
hear
so
you.
he
that's
was
a crazy
running into the
noise.
camera,
Let
so I
me
had to
go
move
fix
it.
that.
Can we see the dog?
Linus,
Minus?
come here, buddy.
Um,
Running down the
Does anyone
stairs.
know how long that was? I didn't record. I didn't time it.
Oh, fuck, I forgot to press stop. Well, I pressed stop and it's 11:15, so it's probably more like 11.
Okay.
So we're
Yeah,
good.
we're probably good.
Perfect. Sounds
Perfect.
good. to
I think
me.
it went great. You
Yeah.
guys want to stick with that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good with it. I don't want to do a second take.
Yeah, no.
Why? It's a
Neither.
picture of your dog.
Linus, I'll send it in the group chat.
Okay, I'm gonna upload it to Google Drive and then I don't know, just
We only need to have one submission, right?
Yeah. Only
Yeah, but
one
we need to-
person, she said.
we need to put it like in 2 places, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, sick. Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Sweet.
Thank
Okay,
you.
cool. Thank
Bye
you.
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.